what do you think is happening right now in this conflict? I know there's been like all of this propaganda that is saying that, oh, the Russians are taking these losses. And
it's the eye of the storm now, man. Right? I mean, they did. Look, they
obviously they did take some losses. And a lot of it took
a big hit there in northern Luhansk, but my guess is that it's going to get much worse now. That Putin is not going to take a loss here. And listen, as long as I'm talking about Mearsheimer wrote another thing. I think it was for Foreign Affairs, which good for them for running this stuff. I mean, they ran a good thing by Trita Parsi about the Iran nuclear deal too. I'm almost certain it was in Foreign Affairs where Mearsheimer said, look, man, we could have a nuclear war here. And he outlined it. And again, you got to always keep in mind, we're talking about a government program here. And that's in Russia and in America. Foreign policy is decided by these ridiculous committees, by the social psychology among a bunch of different cabinet officers fighting over their status and all these weird things that are not how your doctor's office is run or any other kind of thing, right? It's more like a school, right? Zero tolerance. The valedictorian has a butter knife. She's still expelled because we have a zero tolerance knife policy. And there's no adult with a brain who can change what the words say on the paper. I mean, it's that kind of level of bureaucratic kind of stupidity baked into all of this. And so the premises are simple. We cannot let Ukraine lose. Russia must lose. And we refuse to back down from that. And we'll pour in as many weapons as we can. And if it comes down to it, Mearsheimer is afraid they'll put in American ground troops because the very territorial existence of Ukraine will be absolutely in jeopardy. And that could come, as we were already discussing, much sooner than later. Biden could tomorrow say, nah, that's it. I'm putting the Marines in there. I'm not letting this go any further. We're going to stop it. And now you got a war, a real war between NATO and Russia right on their border. That could happen. I don't want to overstate this because I don't really believe it, but what the hell? It's within the realm of possibility. The Ukrainians press their advantage and they start completely kicking Russian asses all over eastern and southern Ukraine and making major advances. Putin can't afford to lose any more than Biden can afford to lose. So once neither side will give up and neither side is really in a position to win in a full knockout blow. Both are determined beyond reason, especially the American and Western side, to see their side prevail. And that could very quickly lead to nuclear brinksmanship. Very quickly. And again, they've warned over and over again that they could use nuclear weapons in this circumstance, and including they've threatened to nuke the United States of America. And if you look at Putin's declaration of war, he threatened to bring the fire here.
Yeah. Do you think there's one of the big responses, the pushback that I get from this is that people go like, well, look, you make a deal with Vladimir Putin, they go, that's just appeasement. I think one of the greatest myths.
Just turn around the other way. The same thing with the bully thing. Who's the nuclear armed bully determined to have their way? Why do we have to believe that it's Putin? Why does it have to be that America is Christopher Reeve's virgin Superman, never told a lie, never committed a sin, 100% Scout's honor? No, America is the government that has murdered 2 million people in the last 20 years. 2 million of them. America's the one who started this war, really.
It's funny to me, and I think it's because of the kind of like the Chamberlain story and in World War II and how that's been like kind of become the well, I don't know what has to be the basis of all foreign policy, right? That so many people believe that appeasement is what really fails. I would say to these people, go read Pat Buchanan's book. Go read Churchill, Hitler, and the Unnecessary War. It's a really great book. However you feel about Pat Buchanan, really great book. But it's like this idea that appeasement is really, that's what leads to the worst thing ever in the world happening. And you're like, but really? Is that the story
Sometimes.
of the 20th century? I mean, is it strictly the story of the 20th century that appeasement is what leads to disaster? Maybe aggression is what leads to disaster sometimes too.
In fact, look, I'm glad you bring that up, because people always with Putin, they want to make the analogy to Hitler. But I think the analogy is, he's much more close to Hindenburg, right? And this is the guy who preceded Hitler. This is as I tried to make the case in my debate with Kathy Young about this, that America is essentially treating Russia post Cold War the way Britain and France treated Germany post World War I. And what they should have done was not humiliate and beat them and kick them while they're down and demand all these war reparations and strip them of all their territories and all these things that made the German people so, first of all, just absolutely destitute, that they were willing to turn to communists and fascists to solve their problem in the first place. And then ultimately to the Nazis to restore all their lost glory and the rest. It led to the worst catastrophe that ever happened as the result of that. So, always with as Robert Higgs, I think he coined this phrase talking about FDR's antics in the lead up to the attack on Pearl Harbor, where he criticized them, for the historians, for always truncating the antecedents, meaning leaving out what America did to provoke the fight that now they're in, which you always find. And look, like, I didn't go to college, man. What do I know? But I have heard of the appeasement theory and the spiral theory and this and that, all the different international relations theories of, crisis prevention and escalation avoidance and all of these things. Sometimes it's right to appease. Sometimes it's not. You could argue that the Russians have been appeasing America this whole time, that Vladimir Putin should have drawn his red line hardcore and backed it up back in the George W. Bush years and let them know, look, if you put anti-missile missiles in Poland, I'm going to attack those with cruise missiles. Yet means yet, you heard me. Maybe he shouldn't have appeased Barack Obama by authorizing the aggressive war in Libya, which they promised, Obama and Hillary promised, was just a no-fly zone to protect the poor people of Benghazi, which then turned into a bait and switch for a full-scale regime change against Gaddafi, which led to unlimited catastrophes in terms of the spread of jihadi terrorism throughout.
Still going on today.
The refugee crisis of the 2010s and all of the rest of that. And they've been appeasing us this whole time. George W. Bush tore up the anti-ballistic missile treaty. Donald Trump tore up the INF treaty. They, all of them have had these massive exercises with American long-range bombers and attack boats and ships in the Black Sea and the Baltic Seas and the Okhotsk Sea that's in the far east there near Vladivostok. I mean, what if the Russians were practicing first strikes on North America all the time? Again, it sounds absolutely crazy. They wouldn't dare. But we do that to them all the time. All the time. We fly our nuclear bombers 12 and a half miles off of their coast to force them to light up all their defenses so we can practice which radars we have to take out when we do this for real. And as the soldiers say, you fight like you train. And they keep training for attacking Russia with nuclear bombs and right in their face all the time. And again, with these MK-41 missile launchers, the Mark 41 missile launcher. I mean, if I tell you they put in these missile launchers and they say that, no, they're anti-missile launchers for shooting down missiles from Iran, not from Russia. Iran doesn't have missiles that can reach Poland. They don't have nuclear weapons to put on them anyway. But, and then if I tell you, by the way, it's just a total accident and coincidence and meaningless coincidence that these same Mark 41 missile launchers can also fit Tomahawk cruise missiles, which can be tipped with thermonuclear H-bombs that are now, 15 minutes flight time from Moscow or 30 minutes flight time from Moscow. I mean, you think the Russians just don't care about that? Well, Obama's White House told CNN to tell us that doesn't mean anything. Don't worry about it. There's a quote from Jack Matlock, who was the second to last ambassador to the Soviet Union. And he met at some club in New York where I guess Putin was in town for the UN or something. And Matlock said to him, he goes, listen, you know that missile defense is just a ripoff. It's just a boondoggle. It doesn't work. It's all just to steal money from the American taxpayer. So if we're ringing your country with anti-missile missiles, you shouldn't fear that or react against that. And Putin says, look, I mean, first of all, geez, couldn't you subsidize some other part of your economy instead of the anti-missile department, you know? But secondly, he says something to the effect of, I'm in charge of security around here, man. What do you want me to do? You're ringing my country with anti-missile missiles. I got to presume that they work. And then what do I got to do? Obviously, build more missiles. And it was 3 years after that was in 2015. It was 3 years later in 2018 that he announced that whole new generation of Russian nuclear weapons, that he said in the speech that this was a direct reaction to George W. Bush tearing up the anti-ballistic missile treaty, that he had ordered this weapons development program then. So now we're in a nuclear arms race with Russia again, and they're ahead.